Hi everyone, Bernard here from WM Custom Furniture. Welcome to my first video on building a desk. What you're seeing now is some of the stuff I built in the past. I'll put text on screen of what it is so you can get an idea of what it actually is. So this is the kind of stuff I enjoy doing. So if you're into that kind of thing, this video is going to give you an idea of how I think and how I put together a project like this. If the video does well, I'll do more of them in the future on the other stuff that I also do. So getting started. I like building desks with a steel frame and a wooden top. On this I usually add whatever the customer wants, like drawers or cable trays and whatnot. I've done a few projects like this, and as you can see from these pictures, I love doing it this way. Most people I do work for tend to get stuff built on a budget, but I'm hoping to change this. It allows me to build nicer pieces, but it also allows me to enjoy the projects more. This project started off normally, but I managed to convince the customer that a wood other than pine would be a good choice. I enjoy working with nicer woods, so I tend to be a little bit more lenient on my prices when I do get a nice hardwood to work with. Now this is one of those times where the client saw the light and opted for a solid kiaat top instead of the usual pine that I have to work with. He wanted the standard steel base that I built for numerous previous desks as well, and used this one pictured as his example. So this is where I started. I didn't capture the footage of me building the base, but it's essentially me using a welder and making pieces of steel stick. Here you can see me spray painting the base in satin black as per the customer's request. This base is made from 76 by 25 mm steel tubing in 2 mm thickness. I usually use steel 1.6 mm thickness, but for some reason for this project I ordered 2 mm. I probably won't use 2 mm again, it's just too thick and heavy and it's not really necessary for a project like this. But at least the client got a very strong desk out of it. So anyway, I usually tack the steel together and then I level the base. I move it around on several surfaces to ensure that it stands flat and it doesn't wobble, and then I give it the final welds. After welding I use a flap disc on a grinder and I flatten the welds, and then I use the automotive spot putty on all the welds as well. I leave it overnight to dry, and then the next day I'll use the flap disc again to flatten, and usually by then you can barely see any divots or marks where the welding took place. After this, the steel was cleaned and primed with an anti-rust primer and left to dry for a few days, and then it's time for spraying. I like to use a similar color primer and spray paints, as it limits the effort I have to go through to get a good looking coverage, and it also prevents drips as you inevitably spray less at a time, which is good. The primer was rolled on with a foam roller and it gave the steel an interesting texture. It looks and feels good, and as can be seen here I quite like it. I'll probably use it again for some projects in the future. Once the frame was almost done, we got to the fun part, the tabletop. As mentioned before, the tabletop is made from kiaat, and I like to go as thick as I can on these as they just look nicer. And to be very clear, this tabletop I did not make or laminate myself. The wood supplier has the tools to do it much better than I can, and in much less time as well. So this time saving is a cost saving as well, which I pass on to the client directly, so it helps us both. I order the top with the client's required dimensions, and they provide it laminated, flattened and very roughly sanded. I then do my thing on the top, sanding, routing, finishing, fitting and etc. The first thing I always do is a little bit of sanding. Here you can see me unwrapping the desktop at home for the first time. I saw it at the shop when I picked it up. This was the first time I really got to see it with time on my side. The first thing I do is to look for defects and faults on the top, and obviously the best looking side will face up, and the one with the most faults will be the underside. This side looked good, so I flipped it over and immediately saw that this would be the underside. There are knot holes that don't pass through the tabletop, so they're not serious, but I don't like the way that they look. There's also a little bit more work involved in getting them fixed up, and this client didn't mention a specific love for epoxy, so I didn't want to fill them in. If both sides are free from defects, like these, I choose the side with the prettiest grain pattern to face up. In this case, the prettiest side was also the one without defects, so it was a nice stroke of luck. Now I flip it back to confirm the choice, and then I get to sanding. I decided to sand on the stoop, but this turned out to be a bad idea. I couldn't find sandpaper in our small town with punched holes, so except for this first 120 grit disc, the discs I use are solid, so there's no dust extraction. I quickly learned why you sand kiaat with the dust mask, and the sanding here didn't last long. The top comes from the shop sanded in their wide belt sanded to 80 grit, so the first pass here I just sand with 120 grits to get rid of the coarse sanding marks. This allows me to see which marks are sanding marks and which are simply the wood's natural grain structure. Then I blew the dust off the top and decided to give it another shot with the 120 grit before moving up in grids. I'm sanding the underside first, and I promise I won't show you all the sanding all the time. I usually sand with progressively finer grits, starting at 120, then proceeding to 150, then 180, then 220, and then I'm finishing on 320. The underside I rarely sand past 180 as it's just not worth it. You're never going to feel it, and it's not going to make a difference to the top anyway. You can see the dust on the desktop here, and it's quite hectic, and yes, I should be wearing a dust mask, I know. After sanding and cleaning up the knots and so on, it's time for the next step. That's routing. I love the router, but I hate using it. To me, it's a big risk tool, because if you stuff something up, it's a permanent big problem. Here I am in my storeroom the next day after sanding the underside to 150 grits, and the next step before the underside is done is borrowing Blacktail Studios design here, and that's to place a 45-degree chamfer on the bottom edge of the desktop. Paired with a small roundover on the top, it looks fantastic, which I'll show a little bit later. Here I'm just installing the 45-degree chamfer bit and gauging how deep I want the chamfer to be. There's no real measure here, I just eyeball it until it looks good. The top is 35 mils thick, so the chamfer needs to be deepish, and so I need to do 2 passes with the router. You can't just cut it in one. I have an old router and it's a bit stiff, so I struggle a bit, but we get there. Eyes and ears on, and here we go. First pass done, adjusting the depth, and second pass, here we go. With the second pass done, and I'm happy, and after the second pass I hit it with the sander again and give it a water spray to raise the grain before I did a 180 grit final pass on the underside. The water spray gives you an idea of what the wood would look like when finished, and I think it looks pretty nice. Next up, I placed the frame upside down on the top and marked out where the steel insert should go to mount the tabletop to the frame. I drilled some pilot holes, which is then drilled to the correct size and depth. The countersink bit ensures the hole is neat, and the sander removes the last rough bits around the edge. This is a daunting task, as again it's a permanent change you make to the desktop, and if it's not in the correct place, you are screwed. Finally, the threaded insert is installed, and the mounting hardware as well as the underside is pretty much done and ready for finish. Next, the top side. After sanding to 150 grit as well, the roundover on the top edge. Replacing the chamfer bit with the roundover bit and adjusting the depth of the cut. This is a very small roundover, I think it's a 1/4 inch or something like that, so there's no need for 2 passes, I can just cut it in one, and then cutting time. This is more stressful than the underside because the top side is what you'll see, so there's no room for error here. Once done, I give it a little tap or a slap of approval because I was quite relieved that it's over, and I think it looks great. After this I did a little bit more sanding. I checked all the corners, made sure everything's fine, and once happy I gave it a spray of water to raise the grain before the final sanding. A quick view of what it looks like all over, final sanding done, and then it was time for finish. For this tabletop I used Wood Octane. It's an interior and indoor satin sheen polywax finish that penetrates and seals the wood, and I think it offers a great deal of feel and protection. The underside already received 2 coats, and I only wanted to show you the top side because nobody wants to see me paint for 20 minutes. The first coat is sort of a flood coat, so you add as much of this stuff to the wood as the wood would absorb. So you see I'm applying it with a thick brush and quite liberally. You almost can't add too much at this stage, so you keep adding it to see where it penetrates, and I'm using the light source to see where it penetrates, and then I'm adding more over those sections. Bubbles and so on is also not a concern because it'll get flattened with the sander as well before any subsequent coats are applied. In total I did 3 coats, actually I think I did 4 coats on this one, come to think of it. And for the last coats I moved it out of the storeroom and into the garage. The garage is cleaner, it has better light so I can see better. I did some sanding between the coats, This took a few more days to get done, especially with the cold weather we had, but in the end I got it done. And here's a shot of the tabletop mounted to the frame, and then some pictures with it completely done, alongside with the cable tray that the client also asked for. In the end he was happy, I'm happy, and that's what matters most to me on this. I think this turned out pretty great, and yeah, I love the final result. The client did send me a pic of the desk installed, and yeah, and he's happy, so I'm happy. Yeah, thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like it, and if there's enough interest, I may very well make more of these. Next time maybe with a little bit more detail, actually capturing the steelwork if I do it again. And yeah, that's it for now. Thanks for watching, guys.